court case is underway at the moment, in fact, calling for an injunction over the continued feral horse cull in the Kosciuszko National Park. Robert Borsak is with the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. He was part of the New South Wales government inquiry, and he thinks there are a number of problems with the cull, namely aerial shooting and also the calibre of the rifles used. He doesn't take issue, though, with the survey of the horse numbers, but he says he does have some animal welfare concerns, but overall he is in favour of getting the very high horse numbers down in the park as they cause a lot of environmental damage.
We're in favour of keeping the animals, being culled at a level that is conducive to proper environmental management in the park. It's very, very important. I think all parties except the animal justice people and certainly the Greens who want to wipe them all out are on that track. We believe that they have a place there, but equally we don't think that the levels that they are there now, and I think it's pretty much proven that there's somewhere between 14 and maybe 23 or 24,000 there. Where they're occurring in the park can cause a lot of damage, and it is a fragile environment. The high country of New South Wales is a very fragile area, and it needs to be looked after.
Do you think that there's a concern, that 7,000 carcasses being left in the park? I mean, some of the groups are alarmed about that, and they think that that could be a bit of an issue for tourism and the environment too.
I think in the short term there's definitely environmental issues in relation to that. Pigs eat carcasses like that, for example. We've got a pig problem. But I think based on what I've seen, they can rot down pretty quickly. They've only done it in a quick and dirty way, and normally I think what they would have done, and certainly I've seen it done in the south of Sydney here in the Royal, if they shoot deer there, they used to lift them out and take them away. They didn't leave them on the ground to rot. So I think leaving over 7,000 carcasses laying around is definitely a concern.
Do you think that there's been some doubt cast on the numbers, but you're pretty confident the numbers are right?
Yeah, I think we've had a look at the survey work. We've gone in behind and spoken to some of the people who are doing it. I think the government did it actually twice, and the numbers came out reasonably close. I think we're satisfied that the numbers are there. People are running around saying, there's only 3,000, they're all up. Well, the actual numbers that have been culled to date actually could lie to that. The reality is there are a lot of brumbies there. The other thing that isn't spoken of very much too is that the park itself is surrounded by a lot of state forests, and they're high timber, tall timber country. Those forests are also full of brumbies. So if at any one time there aren't, say, 14 or 15,000 or 20,000 brumbies actually in the park, you can bet your bottom dollar they'll be, in the state forest adjacent to it. And they do move backwards and forwards, there's no question of that. I've seen it myself.
Do you think that there's an issue for your members, the shooters that want to go in and shoot the brumbies or shoot the feral pigs with this cull happening at the moment?
No one is allowed to shoot in the national park.
Yeah.
So that's always been the rule. It hasn't changed.
Or the state forests adjacent? The
state forests adjacent are declared for hunting, but horses are not allowed to be shot. And in that program, it's never happened. They're just simply not on the game list. That's the way it worked right from the very start. If you go back to 2002, the regulations simply did not allow horses to be shot.
Are you happy with the way the cull's being done? Some people say the calibre of the bullets is not big enough, or they have a concern there about the way it's being done, the aerial shooting.
Well, our party, prima facie, does not support aerial shooting. We just don't think it's a humane way. What brings that into sharp focus is the fact that they're using .308 Winchesters, which may be appropriate for shooting pigs, up to 60 kilos, perhaps 50 or 60 kilos. But to shoot a running horse that could weigh anything up to 400 kilos with a 150 grain copper bullet up to 15 times is just simply not humane. And yet we had the Deputy Secretary, Mr. Fleming, telling us that there were no unacceptable outcomes in this, and we had the RSPCA who completely have lost the plot on all of this, telling us no, they're quite satisfied with all of this. The reality is, I think that this was an exercise of expediency over humaneness. The early part of
So what would you suggest then?
Our first suggestion was the government should be ground shooting, and they started to do that. but then they decided that they weren't killing enough fast enough. So then they decided to go to helicopter shooting. And we took evidence in, I think, the first day of the inquiry, actually, going back some months ago, where from ballistics experts that were saying that these calibers were inadequate. You've got to have a caliber with the size of the bullet and the power appropriate to kill these animals in 1 or 2 clean shots every time. Whatever the animal's running, it's not dead. And it cuts exactly across the grain of what the RSPCA, for example, recommend if you were going to kill an animal in an abattoir. You have to render it insensible, and then you can kill it. It's just not right.
So you think they're turning a blind eye, which is the sort of thing the Brumby Alliance and some of the animal rights groups are saying. So you agree with some of that?
Absolutely, they're right. Right. They just turned a blind eye. Expediency is the way to go. And you've got to ask yourself, Michael, how did we get to this situation? How did we get to this situation? Well, we got to this situation because Brumbies have not been properly managed for over 50 years in the park. I mean, many people probably wouldn't know, but they used to do annual roundups, for example, in the park. Well, high country cattle runs were banned, cattle were gone, all the runs were taken over. No one was catching up horses anymore. Numbers would increase every 3 years by 50% under good conditions. And they've had excellent conditions for decades in that park. And the National Parks and Wildlife Service have simply not managed it properly for decades, because they have a lock it up and leave it, lock it up and forget about it attitude.
Which they do, which a lot of people criticise them over other feral animals.
Absolutely right.
Apparently there's a court case about calling for an injunction on the cull at the moment. It's been brought by the Brumby Alliance, I understand. I think that's right. What's your attitude to that? Should the cull be ceased? Should there be an injunction?
Look, if they want to injunct and they can get an injunction, I think it would not be a bad idea to stop it where it is at the moment and actually do a proper assessment on where we're at with this whole thing. But the government's just trying to, sort of nose down, tail up and just go for it and then get it out of the road. And that's just not the right thing to do as far as I'm concerned.
Robert Borsak from the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. He was on the New South Wales Government inquiry looking at the cull and the horses issue. Now, if we hear an outcome from that court case, it's underway at the moment, calling for an injunction over the continued feral horse cull in the Kosciuszko National Park. Any news on that, we'll bring it to you.